everyone, we are here in downtown Hollywood with a beautiful building by Morphosis Architects. That is Emerson College right behind me. And today what we're going to be doing is photographing architecture a little bit guerrilla style. There are many situations in my career where I have been asked to get photographs of a building when I don't have access arranged. The building has been completed a decade ago and the new tenants aren't really that helpful in getting me in there, or I just want to take some shots for my own portfolio. And this is very much a situation where we're going to be sacrificing perfection to just get something great, which we can then tweak in post-production to make some great photographs. So this is a subject that I actually photographed for my book, New Architecture, Los Angeles, a couple years ago. So I know the site pretty well and I've been here before, but something worth noting is this is in the middle of the COVID pandemic, and as a result, this place is totally closed down, so there's not going to be too many lights on. In fact, most commercial architecture is kind of off the table right now. Who knows how long this is going to last before we can all get back to shooting commercial stuff like this again. But for right now, we're going to take the best shots we can outside. Now, in a perfect world, I'd love to get a twilight shot of this image, but unfortunately, because none of the lights are going to come on, it's not going to happen. I've settled for the second best thing. I've scouted this at a pretty good time of year, and what's going to happen is I've gone out on Sunset Boulevard and stood right in the middle of the road like a total idiot with my phone, and I used my Sun Surveyor and Light Track apps. These apps show that that sun is going to set right down the middle of the boulevard, sort of like a bootleg Manhattan henge sort of thing. And what I'm hoping is going to happen is we get some really pretty sunset colors just before the ultimate twilight part of the night. So we should get some great directional golden sunlight kind of coming down the middle of that street, lighting up this beautiful reflective metallic building. And that should give us a pretty good shot, given that it is COVID season and none of those lights are going to come on at all. So when I shoot like this, I run with a very pared down kit. It's oftentimes just me alone with one camera, a few lenses, and a simple tripod. What I have here is my really right stuff travel tripod with the Arca Swiss P0 hybrid on top of it. I've got one camera, my 5DSR, and my 3 tilt shift lenses. This is kind of a situation where nothing is going to be perfect. You don't have control over every part of the scene like we're photographing a house. I'm just kind of in my inner tube, floating down the river at the mercy of the currents here. I'm going to do the best I can to get the best shot I can, planning around the best time of day. Hopefully there's not too much distraction. There's not too many people outside right now. It is a bit quieter. We're going to have to deal with cars. We're going to have to deal with imperfections in the building, construction, lights, all that kind of stuff is out of our control. Like I said, we're running a very pared down kit to get what we can with minimal impact. Now, since I'm not going to be light painting, since I'm not going to be able to change anything about the scene, I can't go in there with my cam ranger and rearrange the furniture or anything, obviously, because the building is closed. I'm going to have to move much faster. The best shot of this building is actually right in the middle of a street, so I want to get in, get my bracket fired off, and get out as soon as I can. I am working with only natural light, and therefore I want the absolute best natural light I can get to make these photos as quickly as possible. So when I was photographing this project for my book, I actually had to come back multiple times. Right now, at this time of year, the sun never really hits the front facade of this building until just before sunset, and that is true for most of the year. So what ended up happening was I had to make multiple trips. I had to come out here at sunrise, at sunset, at different times of the year to get any sun on the front of that building at all. And that may be true in many situations where there are certain projects where the sun does not hit the front of the building or does not hit the facade you need. It might work in June, but it might not work in January, so you've got to be cognizant of that. And I've delayed some projects because I knew they weren't going to get any sun until May or June of the summer. I have a feeling that this beautiful graphite metallic surface is going to reflect a lot of the oranges and blues in the sunset as the sun gets closer and closer to the horizon. At the middle of the day, you might get just like a solid blue or gray, but that material is so much more interesting than a single monotonous color. What I also think would be really cool is we could get some really dramatic contrast and light coming down the middle of that boulevard. The sun is literally going to be right over the double yellow line in the middle, and I'm thinking it'll light up the trees, light up anything that sort of sticks off the front of the building that's cantilevered out a little bit, and give us some really interesting definition. Again, I'm hoping, I don't know, there are some wildfires out there right now. I have a feeling we will get some sun, but how intense it is remains to be seen. So sunset is rapidly approaching, and we only really have a 10 to 15 minute window to get 3 or 4 pictures. I'm going to pre-select the angles I want to try to get, and make sure that I'm in the right spot at the exact right time of day to get exactly what I'm looking for. So I'll be using one camera. We're in downtown Hollywood. It's a little sketchy. Just using one camera, and I'm going to move as quickly as I can. Again, perfection in the field is never going to happen. We're going to have to try to achieve that in post, but I do want to be there at the right time of day in the right light and get good compositions that I can start from. My most important shot, and a pretty obvious one, albeit dangerous. If you try to recreate this, please be very careful. You didn't get that advice from me. is going to be right in the middle of the street here. I'm probably going to run out, run a bracket, and get out of the way as quickly as I can. When this shot is good, there's a few other shots that are good at the same time. So I'm basically going to be here, run my bracket, walk around the corner, run a bracket, jump across the street, run a bracket, check out my work, and hopefully that's enough to get us what we really need. All right, so I'm out here in the middle of the street, and we have some gorgeous sunset colors, not only behind the building, but being reflected in it as well. Unfortunately, it looks like the haze from the wildfire has really cut down on that sunlit effect coming through, but we still have some really nice soft directional light, as if a warm softbox was placed off camera to the right, filtering through everything. And I think after some post-production, this is going to be an amazing shot. I am at anxiety level 10 right now, trying not to get hit by a car, so I'm going to get out of here. All right, so we've got our first shot, and I've run around the corner here. I'm going to try something fun for the second shot. We've got this wannabe old building here in Hollywood, and I'm going to try to do a little juxtaposition between old and new. I really like this angle because it has the sunset to the west being reflected beautifully in that metallic surface of the building. I'm going to try to use these columns here as a framing element to create some contrast in the scene, and just do something a little bit more interesting than just another building on the side of the road shot from across the street. So I'm going to get a little tighter lens. I'm going to go to 24. Might be a little bit too wide, but I can crop. Again, I'm not chasing perfection here. Just trying to get as many good shots as I can as the sun goes down. We've got about 15-20 minutes to get this before it's sunset. I'm going vertical, so I'm going to swap my camera 90 degrees. All right, I've got everything framed up. Let's see how this looks. Now what I'm doing is I'm going to lower my ISO to 100. That's going to give me a longer shutter speed to try to get some blur on those cars in the street. I think that would be an interesting element. All right, that's kind of interesting, but I really like something that I've seen in here, which is an even tighter version of that. So I'm going to try my 50mm tilt shift and see what I can come up with. All right, this looks awesome. This is more of a detail, showing all the different materials in the facade reflecting in the sunlight. All right, so I got a pretty cool detail here. Here's how it looks. Let's move on to the next shot. Okay, so I found the next setup. What I like about this photo is that you can see all the way through the aperture, the opening in this building. And again, you get a really cool collection of different textures and materials on the front. Another cool thing about this shot is the Sunset Boulevard sign front and center. It really gives us some context and lets the viewer know exactly where we are. I love that there's this perforated street level retail, a very important thing for architecture these days, especially in city planning and development. And then these lovely trees with their flowers that are softening the really hard steel forms of the architecture. Because I'm so close to the front of this building, I'm going to switch back to my 17mm tilt shift. I don't think there's any way I can get my shot with the 50. All right, here's a test shot with the 17. I think that's a little bit too wide. I'm going to switch to the 24, and I think I can still get everything good in the same photo with more pixels on target. Okay, so I framed this up with a 24, and it looks absolutely perfect. You can see how far I've had to shift to get everything in the frame. We're almost looking straight up at the top of this building. We're also getting a little bit of light in the interior. None of the actual offices are being turned on, but I think there's a lot of landscape lighting that's come on as it's gotten darker outside. Okay, so I've got time for about one more shot here, and what I'm going to try to do, there's this massive wall of glass. These louvers on the near side of the building actually open up depending on the amount of daylighting coming in, and I think it would be so cool to get the sunset reflected in that glass. It is a little bit hazy, and I might have to do some embellishment in post to really bring this out, but I think if it works with this really cool Hollywood sign and these quintessential palm trees right here, it could be a killer shot. There's one interesting challenge that I'm going to have to work around. There's this awful light pole and these advertisements. I'm going to take them out in post. What I'm actually going to do is shoot this here and then move the camera a few feet to the right and take the same scene and then skew in that city street behind the light post to take it out in Photoshop. I've been using the Cam Ranger Mini, and as you know, I had a major back surgery about a year ago. I still hate to bend down like this more than necessary to see what I'm doing. I probably should upgrade to one of those little flip screens, but I really like the ability to have this big screen right here so I can make sure that I'm not doing anything stupid in the frame, which as soon as I get rid of this happens more often than you would think. So now I've got some nice traffic moving here. Let's see if I can get a cool shot. All right, now I'm gonna move the camera to get my second shot. I'm actually gonna go a little bit left so I can get a clean edge of that palm tree, which would be a complete PETA to retouch in Photoshop. This branch is in the way, so I'm gonna hold it out of the way here. Now that branch is another reason that this Cam Ranger is so important. There is no way I would have seen that through the viewfinder or just by using a little screen on the back of the camera. I'm literally nowhere near the camera and holding this away out of the frame and triggering it. Thank God for this little thing. All right, that's a wrap. We got 4 pretty cool shots. Let's take these into post-production and see what we can come up with. Okay, so welcome to the post-production segment on our downtown Hollywood street shooting editorial style architectural photography. What I'm going to be doing for this lesson is a little bit different. I will be doing this entire edit straight through. I'm going to edit this the same way I would edit editorial photography. Now, I've been hired multiple times, many times, to do, more editorial photography, which is a bit more realistic in terms of color, in terms of reality, in terms of taking things in and out, more recording the architecture as it is at that time, at that moment, in that space, which is a little bit different than my standard architectural photography, which tends to be more illustrative, to glamorize, to sort of embellish a little bit, to make things look as good as it absolutely can, which has more of a commercial, almost advertising slant to it. My job with the book that I created was, again, to sort of document the last 15 years of contemporary architecture in Los Angeles, not to embellish, not to sort of change reality, but to capture it in the best light that I possibly could. So all that being said, let's go ahead and get into this. This is our first shot where I was out running around in the middle of the street. And, it was marginally dangerous. I had someone watching behind me, and you can see that the composition, as a result, is a little bit rushed. It's very not centered. It's skewed. It looks like I was drunk or something. I finally got the time to get one that was pretty well leveled and centered. But yeah, you can, I'm just gonna not, I don't love the fact that these are all, like I said, they're drunk. Every line that is supposed to be straight is not even close to straight. And it wasn't until my 3rd or 4th attempt at running into the street that I got the composition I was really looking for. And that is here. And what I like about this, we have that guy crossing the street. I don't know if I'm in love with him or not. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But let's get started with the edit. And the first thing that I usually do when I'm editing for editorial work is to try to take a file pretty much as far as I can in Lightroom. The only thing I would do in Photoshop is maybe layering together certain scenes like blurry cars or people, that sort of thing. So I'm going to do most of my editing here in Lightroom. Again, I want to keep this as honest and realistic as possible. So highlights come down, shadows go up. I think maybe this whole thing is a little bit underexposed as it came out of my camera. I'm going to err towards brighter. But what I do like, I like that when we get darker, we get some color. So I'm just going to watch it and try to keep it somewhat accurate to reality. And I can pull those highlights down pretty far. That might do it right there. I love the sort of subtle natural gradations in this photograph. We have beautiful warm and cool tones in the sky. And this wildfire effect that sort of muted everything is sort of beautiful in a way in how it filters the light. A little bit of contrast, but I do feel like this is overall relatively flat. I'll do a little texture, a little clarity. Maybe I don't like dehaze. It is hazy, it is smoky. So like a touch of that might help. I don't think we need it, but let's see what happens with vibrance and saturation. Everything is a bit less saturated than normal as a result of that smoke sort of filtering through everything. But I love the warm feeling that we get. So I don't want to completely kill those. Blacks, so I want to pull the blacks up to get a little more shadow recovery. I don't hate that either. Whites, I don't think we need to mess with that. That's looking pretty good. What I do want to see is if I can pull back some of the detail in the sky. I'm going to use the HSL panel, Hue, Saturation, Luminance. I'm going to grab the Luminance slider and see if I can pull the oranges down a little bit and see what that gets me. All right, a few things are happening. The brightness of the yellows in the shot, you can see the road paint and the sidewalk crossings and the planters in front of the restaurant as well as that restaurant way on the left. Those are all being darkened. I love what it's doing to the sky, and I'm kind of okay with it in the road. It makes that line less distracting, makes those planters less distracting. I like that a lot. I don't think I'm going to want to do it with the blues because that's going to start to look fake in a hurry. And yeah, that looks ridiculous, right? What I like is that really subtle blue. There's a nice sort of quiet beauty to these colors, and I'm going to try to keep that as much as I can. Color grading. So the color grading is something we haven't talked about. I'll show you how it works. I'm not going to touch it. I don't think I'm going to use it. This is something that you can use if you're going for a more cinematic look in your photos. I've personally never been a fan. Some people love it. I like to get my results for that cinematic look in Photoshop. I showed you that technique earlier using the sort of color wash layers, those solid colors at light, low opacities, and brushing them in. But say I wanted to bring in some more warmth in the highlights, I could take these little dots right here in the middle, and you can see as I move this around, we get this really interesting change of color in the highlights. And if that's harder to see, you can click on these up here and get a bigger box to play with. And you can adjust the luminance. And I don't actively dislike that. It just feels a little heavy-handed. I've never been able to master that, but that's how it works. You can change the sort of tonality of the highlights and the shadows, the luminance of those colors in the highlights and the shadows. This is very, very popular in portraiture right now. You can turn that on and off again. Yeah, and I don't entirely dislike it. I just feel like we lose a lot of that coolness. So I'm just going to be gentle with it. But again, this is more to show you how it works than anything. And then if I wanted to do the shadows or the midtones, you can click on these up here. And of course, this does everything for you can color grade the entire image at once. But I'm going to go to the shadows, and let's see if I can add some cool blue to the shadows. And you can see like the luminance, it just, when you pull it up, things start to get flat, and it's almost like we're undoing the work that we've done previously. And that it maybe looks a little bit like it's got this filmic look. I'm not gonna use that. I'm gonna double click to remove that. I don't hate it in the highlights. I'll run with that. And that is pretty much all of the color adjustments I want to do. Before I go into Photoshop, I'm going to see if there's a better foreground in another scene here. The guy walking right in the middle. I'm not in love. I feel like the mask that he's got on sort of dates everything. But this is a more documentary style of photography, so maybe I can learn to live with it. Find that red bus very distracting. I don't mind this one though. All the cars, a clear foreground. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take my two shots, the one I edited and the one with the foreground I like. I'm going to, are they exposed the same? F11 1/25th, F11 1/13th. So this is one stop brighter. So I'm going to adjust this down by one stop so that the settings match. And then I'm going to take all of the settings from this photo and sync them with the other image. And I don't need to go plus 50, I need to go minus 50 actually on this. And they should match up. See, they're not perfect. This one is skewed differently than this, and I'll have to do that in Photoshop. I'm gonna take those both into Photoshop. So right click, edit in, open as layers in Photoshop. Okay, here we are in Photoshop. Here's our two images. Our correct perspective, or close-ish to correct perspective shot, and the goofy perspective with the cars in the clear foreground. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select both of those layers. I'm going to go to Edit, auto align layers. And I'm going to leave that on auto. And Photoshop is automatically going to find, when you're hand holding, this is really helpful. When you're doing this not so shot in the middle of the street, Photoshop will sort of skew these two images together to line them up as best as it can. Let's see how it does. I'm going to click OK. And now they've been skewed. And as you can see, Photoshop has done a very good job, not perfect, but pretty darn good job of skewing those two images. And you might say, why don't you just edit this image and save yourself the round trip to Photoshop? I don't like how close this is to the building. And I don't like how much pushing and pulling I have to do with the skewy image to get it where I want it. Everything feels like it breathes a lot better in this pulled back image. There's a bit more space around the building. There isn't so much clutter down in here. We're a little bit closer. So it's just a subtle difference, but you can see those buildings sort of backing out, right? With the further shot, our subject has a bit more breathing room. And it's a subtle thing, and you might argue with me and say it doesn't make a difference, but I think it does. So it's a very simple fix. I'm going to Alt-click, add a black layer mask to our top layer, and I'm just going to paint in that traffic. And you can see there's a few problem spots, and I can sort of paint around those. But for the most part, things are lining up pretty nicely. I'm going to leave that where it is and finish that car and get rid of this right there. So let's see our work here. Perfect. All right. Him in. Cool. So we replaced our walking guy that I wasn't in love with a bit more motion. Adds a nice sort of linear element to the photo down here. That movement there separates our subject from the foreground. And I'm into it. So I'm going to go ahead and save that back to Lightroom. Okay, here we are in Lightroom. Quick couple last fixes here. I am going to, I really like how this looks, take out some sensor dust. This one piece has been bothering me for this whole edit right there. And I'm going to adjust our vertical lines here. We'll go down to lens correction, guided. And I'll drag our lines all the way across the top of the image. Down here. Down over here. And we'll go across the bottom. All right, that looks great. Give it a crop. Let's see if we can do our original aspect ratio here. Enter. I think that is a killer shot. Get rid of that white in the upper corner. I have to come down a little bit. There we go. And I'll give a little bit of a vignette to sort of pull that in. All right, enter, boom. There's our first image. Now, right on to the second one. When I am doing these, shall we say, editorial edits, just like my normal stuff, I want to keep the look somewhat consistent. So let's see if I can grab our color grading and contrast and everything from this shot and apply it to our next shot. So this was our pillars. The exposure's been slowed down because it got darker, I guess. And we're gonna try it. I don't know, this looks like it should have enough detail to mess with. I'm gonna grab this and apply all of those settings to this image. All right, here's our shot. It's obviously uncropped and everything else. I'm not really loving this. I had 0.2 seconds to find the composition. I'm gonna see if I can crop this and find something I like in here. It just doesn't quite look as good as I thought it would when we were on location. You guys know what I mean? Like, it just feels a little goofy. And that's okay, not the end of the world. I wish every shot I took was amazing, but it's not. Maybe that's a 4:5 ratio? Yeah. Five by 7. I like keeping that handrail from being cropped. And we'll go like there. It just doesn't feel, it feels like half the photo is not my subject. And I tried to get cute. And I think I paid the price. Maybe that's okay, but I feel like we lose context. I don't know. I frankly just feel like it would be a stronger photo without any of the nonsense framing the building. And for that reason, I'm going to jump down to this shot, which I immediately feel is better. I'll grab that same edit again and apply it here. So grab these edits and apply them to this photo. Sync. Sync. And the it's already better. The transformation and crop don't need to be there, so I'll uncrop this. But I feel like this is going to look a lot better right off the bat. So highlights maybe can come down a little more. Yeah, I want to get some of that sunset color. I find it hard to work on these before I have adjusted the verticals, so I'm going to do that really quickly. Right down the edge. And we'll go right down this little pipe thing here. And that is looking pretty vertical to me. I think this is a much better photo than the previous one. I'm gonna crop all of that nonsense out. Here we go. Now I got a nice detail here. I love seeing the metal work on the interior, but I feel like it's a little flat color-wise, so let's see what I can do to help sort of spice that up a little bit. I mean, look how much better. I like instantly feel like this is 5 times better. And it's all right. When you're moving quick, not every shot's going to be perfect. I'm pretty happy with the way this is looking. I could even see a crop. Like, I know I'm getting aggressive with this. Just even tighter. Right here. Like a lovely little detail here in that soft light. But it does feel a bit undersaturated. That's feeling okay. No, I think the white balance is good where it was. I love that sort of subtle gradation. The purple to the orange, the cool to the warm. I feel like that's either there, the crop, or I'm going to create a virtual copy here in Lightroom. That's just a second working copy of the same file so I can compare. Or I feel like it's going to be a bit wider. And the wider it gets, the messier it gets. Like you have all this stuff here on the left. I can hit C here in Lightroom to compare my two. So I'm going to adjust this crop. Get the most that I can out of this. That feels like it's too much. I think it's right there. I like seeing this volume sticking out. Maybe I come down a smidge to get that bottom left corner right here. I think that's it. I think that is the crop. I'm avoiding that street light. I'm keeping it clean and simple. Nice detail. One of these. I think this is a much stronger shot. This doesn't teach me anything new compared to the last, the street level photo. Right? I mean, I'm getting all this information here in a much more relaxing, strong composition. And I'm getting new information in this shot that I wasn't getting in this shot. Right? I'm getting that the inside, a nice detail here, the inside of that outer wall. And a good look at how these materials play together. We've got glass, steel, and that front facade, and lovely colors. So I think this is much stronger, and I could see this in a book or in a magazine rather than this nonsense. So let's go on to our next shot. Here's the corner detail. This is similar to the last shot we did, but straight on. And we have some of the lights turned on inside. I kind of think that's cool right here. This passing truck. Maybe there's a way I can work that into the shot. Or is it goofy? I don't know. Does it help or hurt? Now, I like seeing all the way to the bottom. Look at the colors in there. It's beautiful. And this is a cute attempt, but I think seeing... Ooh. I think that looks really nice. That could look nice, but it might be too far gone. Yeah, see, when I pull it down, that's too far overexposed. We're losing color here on the right-hand side. Whereas with this one, I can pull it down, and you can see plenty of that beautiful orange and blue gradient. I'll probably end up doing the same thing here that I did with the last shot. I don't like any cars in this. I think it's too much. I wanted this to be a nice, clean shot. Sort of a wider detail compared to the previous one that ties this to street level and shows how you enter the building. We get a nice view of that down here on the right, which we haven't gotten yet. So I'm going to go, again, I'm going to grab sort of that original edit. Where'd you go? Right here. And I'm going to apply that to this image. And I may have to adjust the exposure. Yeah, it's a little, looks a little bright here. I don't think I need that plus half stop. But that looks really good. Color, I like the colors, I like the contrast. Here's what it looked like before and after. I mean, maybe like I got too far on the highlights here. I like that steel color, but that's okay. A little warmth is all right. And I'm going to take that and combine it with this exposure of the foreground. So I'll synchronize those. And I think I've got to pull that down. Now this is one stop darker, so minus one stop, and those will match. The white balance is a little bit different. I noticed that immediately. So that's, what is that? 6401, 5850. 5850 minus 1. Let's see if I like that here. 5850. Yeah. It's sort of getting darker. It's a little bluer as the sun goes down. We lose some warmth. I like that cooler white balance. Very subtle shift from the last image, but that's what I'm going to work with. So I'm going to take these, edit in, open as layers in Photoshop, and I'm just going to blend away that light trail in the foreground. So we get a nice clean shot. All right, here we are in Photoshop, and you guys probably know this by now. This is going to be a quick fix. All I'm going to do is Alt-click. Oh, here's actually, this is like a really subtle thing to point out, but I think it's worth pointing out. And this is the difference between editing a raw file that's properly exposed versus one that's overexposed. And as I turn these layers on and off, you can see the loss of color data in here on the right. Even though they are 99% the same, all you do is pull the exposure down on the brighter image, you lose a ton of color data right in here. I'll highlight that for you. You lose a ton of color data, and it's that really subtle warm color that I love that would be lost with that overexposed bracket. So I'm going to add a layer mask, take a brush, set the foreground color to black, and hide part of this. It's not a problem in the foreground because none of that's overexposed. It's that really delicate sunset area that's blown out. And that's looking good. I'm gonna go ahead and clone out this wire. I know I said this was editorial, but that's driving me crazy enough to clone it out. And I don't think that is something that does disservice to our subject. So this will be a really quick clone here. All right, so there's our clone job. Let's go ahead and correct the vertical lines on this. I've been doing it in Lightroom, but an easy way to do it exists in Photoshop as well. You can hit Command or Control, Alt, Shift, Option, E, depending on your operating system. I'm on a Mac, so it's Command, Option, Shift, E, and that will flatten all to a new layer. I'm gonna rename that Perspective Correction. And you can hit Command T on that layer, and that will bring up this bounding box here. Before we start pushing, pulling, and skewing, click on your rulers. If your rulers don't exist, you can hit Control or Command R. Those will pull your rulers up. Click, hold, and drag, and you'll get that little line. Make sure you click on the ruler and drag it down. Line that up with your horizontal and vertical lines. I'll just use the curb and the top of the building. And we'll go over to the far right here, and lastly, one right there. And go ahead and right-click on your image and click Skew. You can then zoom in and get your lines right where they need to be. And if you hover over the rulers, you can drag them around. So I'm in Skew mode here, so I'm just going to pull that up to straighten that out. I'll pull that over. And you can see that should land right on my ruler, nice and straight like that. And I'll do the same thing on the right side. You can see this sort of leans away to the right. I'll go ahead and get that nicely lined up, maybe right there. Smidge more. And I have to pull it this way a little bit too, I bet. Right there, that's looking good. And this across the bottom looks pretty good right there. Okay, so you can see the skewing we've done. I'll go ahead and hit Enter. And turn that on and off, and you can see what we've done. And go ahead and save that back to Lightroom. Okay, here we are in Lightroom. I'm gonna go ahead and give that a crop. I think 4x5 or 5x7 will be what we need. There's a 4x5. I want a little breathing room here, so I'm gonna go to 5x7. And there's our shot. I think that's a beautiful image. I will apply a gentle vignette. Sort of pull our eye. You know, I'm not gonna go with a vignette. I'm gonna, a little vignette. A little baby one. And then I want the foreground to be darker. So I'm going to do a neutral gradient filter here in Lightroom. And I'll pull that down to like right there. And I think that looks really, really good. That image is finished. Let's go on to the final one. So we're here in front of our last shot. And what we have is our angled shot looking back at the building, sort of getting this fenestration on the western facade, that would be. Yeah, and the goal here is to make, we don't have a picture of this side yet, so I think we should do our best to edit this into sort of like a cool street level contextual image. I love this Hollywood sign on the left. I hate this light pole. Now I know I said we're doing editorial style photography here, but I want to show you the technique to take something like this out. Whether or not you want to is up to you, but I'm gonna nuke it. And we're gonna try to make this as good as we can. There's a lot to like about this shot. I just don't love that light pole, so let's get started. Here is the composition that I like. I get the whole Hollywood sign. I've got my brackets here. And I've got a few options for cars and light trails and that sort of thing. These feel a little bit much, these like really long light trails. So I'm probably gonna go with a bit of a lesser light trail like this one here. So I'm gonna give that a 1-star rating as my base exposure so that I come back to it. And then we have the shots where I'm going to hopefully be able to take out that light pole. And looking at the exposure values here, that's half a second ISO 124, half a second ISO 200, but they look almost identical. I'm gonna go ahead and do the settings, match total exposures trick here. Even though the settings are slightly different, these look close enough that I can probably get away with just opening them in Photoshop. So I'm gonna go ahead and grab the previous settings. They might not work on this shot because we've completely changed direction and the light is coming from behind us rather than, you know, at an angle or straight on at us. So I'm gonna see if I can use those settings, but if I can't, it's not the end of the world. So I'm gonna select all of these 3 images here and go ahead and sync the settings across all the images and see how that looks. Doesn't look bad. It's a little warm, I think. So that can come down. Again, it has been getting a little bit darker. I don't think we need that brighter exposure yet. You know what? I'll leave it there. I can always make it darker after the fact, and nothing is blown out, so it's okay to be a little brighter. So when we're in Photoshop and we save it back to Lightroom, I've got as much raw information as I can out of it. And I'm gonna go ahead, deselect that one. Got this, got that. I don't think I'm gonna use this empty one here. And this one and the white balance, what do we got? 58, 50, and 4. I'll sync those. Make sure we get the same white balance on these shots. I'm gonna go ahead, edit in, open as layers in Photoshop. All right, so here we are in Photoshop, and know this will become a little bit complicated, so I'm gonna go ahead and name my layers. They're in the wrong order right now, but this is the base layer, and this is the, we'll call that the offset layer. And the goal here is to remove this pole. And you might be looking at me thinking, what in tarnation or how are you going to do that? So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to grab this whole offset light pole right here. I'm going to hit Command C and Command V. And I'm going to line that up with the building behind it. I'll just lower my opacity to 50% to see what I'm doing. And that's pretty good. It doesn't need to be exact, but make sure one part of it is lined up. You know what? I'll make sure I'll use a street sign and a street light down here, right in that Gordon Street thing. So that's nice and sharp. I'm going to put the opacity back to 100. I'm going to add a layer mask to that. And I'm going to start painting out a lot of this area where the telephone pole is. All this extra down here on the street. And you can see it is a little brighter. That's all right, we can fix that in one moment. But you can see that by moving the camera, I'm able to, rather than spend hours and hours trying to like literally clone that pole out, just do sort of a quick edit here. Very carefully painting with a mask what I don't need. And there's a couple pieces that we're missing. Obviously this up here is the next problem we'll deal with. But I'm gonna go ahead and add a curves adjustment layer. I'm gonna rename this bottom of pole. I'm gonna clip my curves to that layer. That is, again, Alt-click. You get that little arrow in the box. And I'm gonna adjust that curves layer. I'm gonna just make it darker so that that layer is the same luminosity as the one above it. And you can see I kind of run into trouble because it looks like it changes throughout the image. Up here it's a bit darker, so that's all right. We can paint that out with the mask and have a nice smooth transition into this area down here. All right, so there's a few little pieces that could use some cleaning. I'm gonna go in here with my brush on that pole mask and just sort of tidy things up a little bit. There's the base of that pole, but it seamlessly blends into that concrete right there. And no one would ever know. I'll get as close as I can. And then I can just add a new blank layer and call that clone. Clean up for the bottom. And grab my clone brush. And I'll just go in here and tidy that up a little bit. All right, so it's pretty cool, right? Look at that. Very quickly, I'll just group that together. We have removed a significant portion of that pole. And I can probably paint a lot of it off that building as well to make that nice and clean. There we go. All right, so I'll turn that on and off just to see what I'm missing here. And like, yeah, the Arby's is a little screwed up, but who's gonna notice? I wouldn't. Of course, you can go in there and, I mean, we can clean up a little bit. You can get as detailed with this as you want. So obviously we have this whole thing to clean up and deal with next. So let's see how we're going to do that. In my offset layer, I have the whole top of the palm tree, so I'll just copy that. Control C. Turn that back on, paste my palm tree layer. And I'll drag that over side of the palm tree. And that might, again, need a little tidying, but not a big deal. All right, so there's a little piece left that's on the base layer here. I'm just going to clone that out. Grabbing the clone tool. Very simple. And then next up we have, looks like this is on that bottom of pole layer. I can just sort of pull that in. Get rid of that extra tree. And I don't need to be perfect. I'm going to clean this all up in a second. And then for this right here, I've got this massive sort of chunk of light that's way in the way. I'll go around like that. And you're like, what is he going to do? How is he going to clone that out? I'm going to create a new layer. Just call that top of light. And I'm going to get the gradient tool. I'm going to grab sample some sky from the top of that area. Change my foreground color with the X key. Sample the bottom. I'm going to click and drag from bottom to top. And there is my quick and dirty method for cloning. Let's see if I can find a better area to sample from. You can also use a big brush to do this. Gradient brush, either one doesn't matter. I'm going to hide the selection. And you can like just gently paint in the sky colors. It does an incredible job. It's not perfect. We will perfect this in a moment. All right, so there's like a very faint outline here. But I mean, look at how much we've cloned out, right? So we have that in place. Now you may remember a few lessons ago in the Hollywood house, we basically used our channels palette to create a luminosity mask. I'm going to do something very similar. I'm going to use the channels palette to select the sky. And I'm going to do a quick sky replacement. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm not going to get involved with like dropping in some crazy sky. Again, I want to keep this looking the way it did in real life. So I'm going to click the blue channel. You can play with this. Maybe sometimes it'll be the red channel, but the blue channel has the most contrast. And I'm going to duplicate that layer. Drag it down to that plus sign. Command M to apply a curves layer to it. Make the foreground black and that sky white. Click OK. And then I'm going to take the soft light brush. So hit B, and I can draw on this channel. And select your brush. Set the blend mode to soft light with your foreground color to black. And start painting in some of these white areas. And we're just going to try to make that foreground entirely black. And you might not need soft light for some of the whiter areas here, so you can go to normal and paint out a lot of this stuff. But for that sort of nuanced stuff, right, you're going to want that soft light brush, and I'll show you in a second. So painting out the foreground, this sign, all the tools you can use in the normal side of Photoshop. It's like I'm in the underworld, the underground here. If you watch, oh no, the upside down. If you watch Stranger Things. You can use all the normal tools in Photoshop in the channels palette as well. So I'll go to B, soft brush, soft light. Yes, a soft brush, but set the blend mode to soft light. And you can paint at will and not worry about messing up or missing the white spot. If I just paint with a normal brush, it's going to bleed everywhere. I want a nice clean mask. So that's looking pretty good. All right, I got that. Command click. Select. Modify. Feather the edge by 1 pixel. Okay. Turn on your RGB layers. Come back. New group. We're going to call it sky. New layer in that group. Sample the horizon color, sample, the sky color, hit G for the gradient tool, drag your gradient across. Goodbye. Any evidence of a sky replacement. There's maybe a little bit, but we can add a mask. And we can brush out some of that down at the horizon. So, is that not the craziest clone job you've ever seen? And if you want to really sell this, you can add a little noise to it. Look at 100%, it's perfect. You can add a little noise to it. Filter, noise, add noise. Right, because the photo is going to have some natural noise, and you can see it. Without the noise, it looks totally fake. So just a little bit of noise, like 1% is fine. It's just a really subtle sky replacement. I'm not going nuts with a crazy purple sky or anything. I'm keeping it real. Zoom in a touch. And for the most part, there's our shot. There's one thing that's bugging me here. I don't like this light trail. Let's see if I can get rid of that. Yeah, I can very carefully mask that out, it looks like. We have to live with that light on the forward focus there. I can blend that in. And then that's an easy clone right here to get rid of that pole. So I'll just add a new layer here. Remove light trail. I'm just going to patch it. I'm not going to get involved with that. Copy this cement, paste this cement, bring it back down here, skew it in. All right, that's looking good. My last annoyance is like, I don't know how intense you want to get with this, but we've got half a car. I'm just gonna go all the way. I'm gonna jump back into Lightroom and grab an exposure without that car and just put this thing to bed. All right, so I've opened this up in Photoshop, and I think all I need to do here is copy this bit of car here and paste it over here just to sort of finish that out. I don't need to get too super duper involved. I just want to make sure that car looks like it's all there. And you might consider this a bit neurotic. That would be fair. But there's our finished car. And it works with the motion blur in here. Everything's looking good. Yeah, I think that's our finished shot. I'm going to go ahead and save this back in Lightroom, and I'll do our last transformations there. All right, so here's our edited shot in Lightroom. As usual, I'm going to go ahead and get my vertical lines figured out. So this one should be pretty easy. Let's see, where did we start? Right on that edge. And I'll go down the back side of the building here. All right, that's looking nice and straight. I'm gonna crop this a little bit. I don't think we need so much. I feel like everything I crop, I'm gonna lose something interesting. bit in on the left. And let's go ahead and add I think we can get away with a decent vignette here. Maybe we need some darkness in the sky to really pull this out. That's looking all right. And I wonder if I can pull some of the yellows out in here. Yeah, see that Emerson College sign up top? When I brighten up those yellows, I get a lot of extra color in the shot, which I like a lot. And I think that is our finished image right there. Very much a streetscape architectural photograph with a lot of context and a lot cleaner than before with this mess. So it's come a long way. It wasn't really that long of an edit, right? I'm looking at this, it's been 30 minutes. And so it's probably been sped up a little bit and I had to talk my way through it, but not that involved once you get the hang of it. So there's a lot of ways to pull extra objects in the frame, a very valuable client skill set to have when you're asked to take something out. That being said, it did sort of torpedo my whole editorial slant on this, but I wanted to show you a cool technique for something that was killing me with that picture. I think we got a great shot now, whereas before, that pole right in the way, didn't love it. I really like the sort of framing here. I love the leading lines. I love the Hollywood sign. It gives great context, great perspective as to where we are. And that's our finished shot. So let's get back on location and go learn some more cool stuff.